Hello, everyone. My name is Michael DeAngelis. I'm the Senior Associate Director for Communications and Technology here at Penn Career Services. And I'm welcoming you to our first event of the new semester. It's our Career Kickoff Live. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to cover a whole range of topics today. I have a lot of amazing colleagues with me. We're going to touch on a whole range of things to get you ready for the new school year. Please feel free to use the YouTube chat if you've got any questions. We'll try and take as many of them as we can. And so we're really looking forward to interacting with you today. So let's get started and let me introduce our panelists for today. First up, it is my colleague, the Senior Associate Director for our Wharton team. It's Natty Leach. Hey, Natty.
Hey, Michael. Sorry, I'm like co-captaining with you here. So good to be here. Good to see you. Excited. Like you said, I'm on the Wharton undergrad team. Always love when we get a chance to do this and kind of casually talk about some of the things that we do a lot of thinking about throughout the year, especially as it starts to get into our academic year. Thanks.
Great. Also joining us is our Senior Associate Director for the College of Arts and Sciences team. It's Ann Dickinson.
Hi, hey, Michael. Hey, guys. I'm excited to be here today. This is actually my first live stream event, so I'm excited for the topics we're going to talk about and some things that will help kick off your career moving into this new school year.
Fantastic. All right, up next, joining us from the engineering team, it's Dustin Miller. Hey, Dustin.
Hey, Michael, Natty, Ann, how's everybody doing? Happy to be here today. It's a great way to start the year. Like Michael said, a whole lot of awesome topics. And definitely encourage people to use the chat. But we're excited to hear from you, and hopefully you take away a lot of deliverables and actionable items today. Thanks for coming, everybody.
And last but certainly not least, also from the College of Arts and Sciences team, it's our friend Laura. Hey, Laura.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to get to know you guys all a little bit more and talk to our students about some different career prep stuff.
It's great. It's a great to be with you all here as we start another school year. I cannot wait to dive into things. So, Natty, I think you're going to lead us off with a conversation about resumes and also with AI.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm going to kind of walk through some of the process that I think is useful in terms of using AI as part of your job search, in particular for some of the documents that you make, like your resume. I think one of the most exciting parts about AI is that employers have been using it for ages. I think there's lots of tools that have been built in that have supported employers in terms of filtering you out. I think there's even more tools than ever to help you filter yourself into all of these opportunities and get noticed a little bit more. Of course, there are always some pitfalls you could fall into that might make it a little bit more difficult or more noticeable that you are using something to assist you. So I wanted to highlight some ways to still get the ease of use and all of the benefits of AI while still kind of balancing out the side that you can still also show your true, authentic, and human self. So to start, I just went to Handshake. If anyone, hopefully many of you are part of the Penn community, you will have access to Handshake, putting in your Penn key and password into upenn.joinhandshake.com. If anyone is joining us from other institutions, you may have Handshake at your school. But I just use this as an example to find a job description that looked kind of interesting. Amazon currently has a 2025 marketing internship posted. And I kind of use this as my basis to start. I think it's always helpful when you're thinking about your search to have like either a prototypical example or here's the specific thing that I want to target right now. So I use this as my starting point. And some of the things that I did was I went to ChatGPT as a starting point, and rather than just putting in something broad like write me a resume, which tends to give you pretty generic boilerplate, here's how you can think about a resume. This could still be helpful sometimes if you're coming from a broad approach and you want to just see what are some things to think about. But I think it's always a little bit more helpful to specify things even more. So one thing that I tried doing instead was just copying and pasting this entire job description in as part of my prompt. And I kind of zhuzhed up the description a bit to hopefully make it a little bit more specific, a little bit more find unique ways that I can add and insert elements into my already existing resume. So we could try something like write some sample resume bullet points for a successful candidate applying to this position, and then just copy and paste that entire, all the junk we just got from that posting itself in. And I think it does a really nice way of thinking through, like, here are some key categories that they picked out from the job description itself already. It's already organizing in marketing experience, analytical skills, leadership and team collaboration, kind of highlighting like these are things that are already in the job description itself. I should say I am heavily relying on AI here, and a little bit because I already read this job description, but I think it always helps to kind of read through this job description yourself too and pick out some things so you have a baseline of what to expect. Maybe you already know, for instance, like, okay, obviously it has marketing in the title. I should be thinking about ways in which I've used marketing, and just to kind of level set and make sure that this is all in the right neighborhood of things. But I actually thought this did an amazing job of having some bullet points here. They aren't always terribly specific to who I am as a candidate, though. So looking through these, we have, for the marketing one, developed and executed digital marketing campaigns for insert my company here, driving 15% increase in web traffic, 10% growth in customer engagement within 3 months. I think, hey, if you put an exact company in there, that's a pretty decent description. It has a clear action verb, developed and executed. It has some context that you were doing it for this particular project that you would fill in the blank there. And it has a result, like some sort of impact of we were driving our traffic this much and it grew this much. Those are all the good elements of a bullet point. However, that might not be true, right? So thinking about how to kind of move this around in a way that best fits your own resume, I think is always particularly helpful. And maybe you can use this as a brainstorming approach. I think one of the best elements of AI is thinking of it as a co-pilot. This is something that you can have either generate ideas for you or kind of work side by side with you. I think chess computers have gotten to a point that we're beyond this, but my one friend who was really into chess when ChatGPT started taking off a few years ago, he kept talking about this idea that was around at the start of chess, of like chess computer programs that people would play against. And it was that the only thing better than a chess program is an expert chess player using a chess program to play against another one. And the idea that like the integration of the human being with the technology is what makes it particularly effective, because the technology has all of the resources to crowdsource all of the best things into one space. And that person has the lived experience or the contextual experience to be able to tailor it and say, oh, in this situation, I think this play is going to be the best. I think computers are probably better than that now, that you just always lose the computer. I think the best you can do in chess is probably get a draw out. But I think we're still in a fairly early stage here for large language models like ChatGPT, where that co-pilot approach is probably the best way to think about it right now. You're working side by side. So these numbers might be completely wrong. I think one pitfall that could come up is if you just copy and pasted some of these in, and a savvy interviewer said to you along the lines of, oh, tell me about how you knew it drove web traffic more, and how that growth happened. Like, how did you assess that and analyze that as a follow-up question? And you were kind of left a little bit speechless. You might be in a rough situation. So definitely read through these and kind of tweak it to best fit your own style and your own background. And I think many of these are doing a good job of lots of that. They have good quantifiable details. They have good, strong action verbs here as well. The next thing I was thinking about is, all right, here's some sample ideas of things I should be thinking about. Maybe I want a little bit more and would just rather generate a list of action verbs that will stand out for this job. And this is very similar to a resource that we already have on our website. We have an action verb list that we use all the time. But I think this does a good job of tailoring it specifically to this job that we're applying to. And it picks out about 20 of them, of ones that could give you some ideas for how to start each bullet point. So maybe you already have a good sense of these here, but there's one that's like, oh, you know what? I did work on this project and it doesn't really fit some of these. What's another way I can strategize how to say that? And maybe you pick out something here like, oh yeah, I did enhance something specifically, or I was in charge of monitoring the progress of a certain project. The next thing that I think is useful is like, this is helpful for the document. It's also helpful for preparing you for interviews. And I think all in the same thing, you've already given them the job description here. I think a great next starting point is if you're getting notice, you can use that to provide some questions that an interviewer might ask a candidate applying for this job, giving as much like specificity to that job description. And it gives you some categories of what you should think about. Hey, general marketing knowledge and experience, the analytical and the data-driven side of things that were in there. All things that I think are probably good to have in mind and stories that you'll want to tell and incorporate into how you think about what they might ask you based on your resume and your document. You could also do some more specificity. I think the hardest part is like the more generic something sounds, the more someone's going to think, maybe they didn't spend a lot of time with this application and they just put some stuff into ChatGPT and copy and paste it over to me. So I would, as much as possible, take these as starting points and add your own specific language to it. You can do that a little bit yourself, where you might say, you may not want to paste your entire resume in here if you don't want to give ChatGPT or whatever kind of AI you're using all of your contact details, but you could do something like copy and paste some of the bullet points from your resume and ask your questions. I did a sample of that, even looking at, we have a lot of great resources for writing resumes in our Learn How To section on our website. And I did that by going to these undergraduate samples. And I just went to this first one. And I mean, I wasn't too worried because this is all fake information, but you could copy and paste this whole thing even and say, here's my resume. And based on my background, write 3 different elevator pitches that would help introduce me in an interview for the Amazon position above. It's still kind of responding to me before, but it will go this way and give you a few like starting approaches, which I all thought were really good. I was doing some networking presentations earlier today, and I thought these were pretty good pitches for the most part. And it already is tailoring it a little bit to your own background and calling out on a few things. Another point of note to emphasize, like, these might not be the right things that you want to put in there, but it's a good starting point. And it already pulls a little bit from the bullet points there, where this person for the sample identified 30 million potential new revenue streams. It has these little impact-driven things that'll help you stand out even in a short pitch. There may be ways in which this kind of misses the why and the passion behind why you're really engaged with that employer, though. So thinking through, like, really, where does your enthusiasm come from, I think is a smart thing to do, to add a little bit to this to help show your authenticity and to show your excitement for the role. So still kind of tweaking it a little bit, but I think these are really great starting points, and all good ways that you can use AI to kind of move yourself forward in a pretty quick way. We just spent about like 8 minutes or so going through this. And you already have a lot of good starting points, from sample bullet points you can use, different questions that you might encounter in an interview based on the job description, all the way to how you might respond to and introduce yourself in that interview. So that was mainly what I want to talk about. And I'd love to open it up to everyone else at this point. And we had a few questions that we wanted to run by. Michael, are you there?
I am here, and we have a couple of great questions. So first up, I'm going to ask, when you're reviewing student documents, what screams AI generated and what screams human?
Anyone want to talk?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. I think, first of all, great job too, Natty. That was really comprehensive. I think that when reviewing documents, what screams AI generated, you kind of touched on it already, Natty, but it was just when something's too general or too broad, it sometimes can have some words that seem a little bit indicative of, oh, like this must have come from ChatGPT. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it more in depth than that, other than just from experience in seeing those resumes. I've also spoken to recruiters who share a similar sentiment at times. So like Natty said, great place to kind of start with these documents, but make sure you personalize a little bit and make it feel human, because at some point a human will be reviewing your resume, at least for now.
I looked up some of this because like there are words that I hear. I just had a candidate search for our new associate director on the Wharton team, and there are words that sometimes I heard in some of the applications. I was like, I don't think anyone would ever say this. Like, where is this coming from? And I actually did, as like almost like a recruiter myself. I copy and pasted my job description for that role into ChatGPT and said, hey, give me some cover letters that are based on this. And all of a sudden I started to like, it was like the Matrix. I could see it all connecting, being like, oh wait, this person used this exact phrase that is so weird there. So kind of trying to counterbalance that is great. I think a lot of times it doesn't do a good job of transitioning between sentences. So you'll see, and this is true of us as people too, you'll see like furthermore and therefore as how you start like every other sentence sometimes. But that's a point of go there and try to add a little bit of a transition that doesn't just sound jargony or boring. And the human side, anyone have like a human side? I think there are positives and there's negatives to the human side. Anyone have like a positive element if they saw on a resume? They're like, oh, this was definitely a person. There's no way AI wrote this.
I guess my advice here, spelling error, sure. My advice here is start with the human element, right? Like I mean, I think the approach is interesting. Like if you really don't know where to start, right? If you're new to resume writing and you're like, give me a how-to, like 101 for resume writing, use ChatGPT. But if you've had some experience and you feel comfortable, right, try your best to tailor your resume using your own thought process and maybe some bullet points you already have. See if you can kind of transform them a little bit, and then put it into ChatGPT if it's not feeling like it's like robust or detailed enough or using strong enough action verbs. Because if ChatGPT builds on a strong existing foundation, I think you're going to get the best results out of that. But as Michael said, absolutely, even just checking for like errors is great too, right? To avoid that before submitting.
I was thinking, we talked about this in the last live stream, but I was thinking like AI is never going to do a great job of showcasing the human element of like what your interests are. And I love that section on a resume, and that always stands out, like that human element of, oh, someone put that they really love Game of Thrones or GeoGuessr, or they are obsessed with Mexican food, or whatever it might be. Always makes me kind of curious to talk to that person and have a conversation in a way that I think ChatGPT is usually either too generic or too broad, that you don't have a chance to make it you.
Yeah, I agree. I think I often tell students to include that interest section because it's what takes you from a candidate to a person. So I think the same thing with using AI. You just have to make sure you're still that person and it's not the robot talking to the recruiters.
All right, we got one more question on this topic before we move on. What other ways can AI assist me in my job search?
Anyone want to start? I can. So one thing I was thinking about was, I mean, I showed this a little bit with the interview questions, but thinking about it like holistically, there are so ways that you can organize your own thoughts or plan ahead for things that you might expect. I think it's a good job at summarizing common job titles, and that might help you search for new things. You could say, I'm really interested in the ESG space, particularly anyone who has a focus on sustainability. And maybe you put in after that, what are some common entry-level job titles working in ESG? And it might give you a few that go beyond just some broad, like maybe analyst or associate type positions that you might have some cool places to kind of search from. I think there are also certainly platforms that you can just submit your resume to. We have access to on our website called Targeted Resume that does a good job of checking your keywords and how well that gets optimized to the job description and kind of gives you a score. I think a lot of students like to do that because it's a very clear cut, like, here's how I'm doing. There are some problems with tying the value of your resume too much to a score, but it does kind of help to see this is what AI is using or thinking about me as a candidate.
I would say something else that is really nice is that if you take, a lot of students will ask like, oh, Dustin, like, I don't know how to reach out to somebody, or I'm not really sure what kind of conversation or questions I should be asking to somebody if I'm going to be networking. And I know that Anne's going to talk about networking here today, but I just think that could be a really great way to assist in the job search as well, is if you can come up with some topics or email structure or LinkedIn note structure, anything like that. I've definitely used that to kind of showcase students like, hey, again, here's a starting place, put in your own touch, but this is a good format to get started with.
It's helpful to get unstuck. I mean, students are so busy. They have so much going on with their courses, their student groups they're a part of, all the extra work that goes into getting through a semester. Sometimes you just need to use AI to get you started, and then you can sort of get that momentum going so that you can be successful in getting this stuff done.
All right. Well, Dustin, you gave us a great segue because, yes, Anne is going to talk to us now about a topic I know our students have a fair amount of anxiety about, which is networking, which I think can sometimes feel like a very nebulous thing. So, Anne, I think you're gonna help us through all of it.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's something that I think comes up in almost every meeting that I have with students or alumni. And oftentimes the first question I get is, do I really have to network? Why do I have to network? And students, can feel a little bit awkward about it, kind of like they want to go into their shell. They don't want to necessarily put themselves out there. And that's just a really, really common feeling. So you're not alone if you do feel that way. However, I do think networking is proven to give you the chance to stand out among the crowd. And when you're competing against lots of people applying for these jobs, you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to kind of show your best self. And one of those things is going to be networking and making connections in the field or at the companies that you're interested in. I also share with people, if you're still feeling a little bit nervous or timid about networking, picture yourself a couple of years from now and you're successful in that job, you're feeling good about life, and you get an email from maybe a current Penn student who says, would you be willing to talk to me about your experience? I'm so impressed. You've worked at X company for this number of years, and I'd love just to pick your brain to see what it is you did to where you are to get to where you are today. Typically the response I get is, I'd be totally flattered. And of course I would share my experience with that student because I'd remember what it was like to be in that situation as well. So if you can try to keep that in the back of your mind, that's really the MO we have with our Penn alums. They usually are very, very happy to give back and to talk to current students just about their experience in general, if it will help. So we do have some great opportunities for networking here on campus. They can be anything from career fairs to coffee chats to info sessions. And in career services, we often host panels and speaker events. These are all either virtual or in person, and they all can be found on Handshake. So definitely check the events tab on Handshake to see what's going to be coming this fall and what you might be interested in attending. They're just great ways to have that face-to-face interaction with employers, alumni, other students, and it's a great way to share information and get a little bit of a better sense of maybe what you want to do with your career. Also, don't forget about your personal network. This could be your neighbor growing up. It could be your roommates, aunts, best friends, cousin. It could be like somebody you're sitting next to on a plane, even somebody that you just meet happenstance. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to ask about people's careers, to ask what they did, what they felt was most impactful to help them in their successful journey, because for all you know, that conversation could lead to whatever your next step is in your career. That said, if you don't feel that you have a strong network of people that are maybe working in the industry that you're interested in, don't worry about it, because being a Penn student, you already have that network right at your fingertips. And that's our Penn Alumni Network. So we have a resource on our website that's the Make Connections and Network page. And the links are all going to be here of everything I talk about, so you can feel free to screenshot. But the Make Connections and Network page, we break networking into 6 main steps. And just for timing purposes, I'm going to jump around a little bit. But the first step I'm going to focus on is step 5, because here we highlight our networking guides, and they're called the General Guides for Informational Interviewing. And on these guides, we're going to be talking about everything from what is networking? What is this informational interview thing that people are saying I should be doing? To how do I find contacts? Where do I look? How do I reach out to people? What are some best practices that I know if I'm investing my time in doing this, I'm going to be successful, it's going to be worth it? What are even good questions to be asking? What's appropriate? What's going to be helpful? What's going to make me look like I'm well-researched and I understand the field that I'm looking to learn more about? And then also, how do I follow up? How do I make this worth it so that it's a continued conversation and it's just not a one and done thing where I never talk to that alum again? So all of that is really crunched into these PDFs we have on our website so that we can, hopefully give you the tools that you need to be as successful as possible. I also want to look at step 3, which is where we highlight our databases where you can find Penn alumni. So MyPenn is our alumni database. We've got over 400,000 alumni there. It's everybody who's come through Penn with the information that Penn knows about them. So student groups they were in, their major, and as well as their email contacts. Then we've got LinkedIn, which is my personal favorite to start with, just because I feel LinkedIn tends to be the most up-to-date in terms of where people work. Usually if somebody gets a promotion or they move to a new company or a career, they're going to update it in LinkedIn. And then third, Career Shift. This is one of my favorite tools that we have at Career Services. It's a subscription service we have that all Penn students and alumni can use for free. It searches all public records, so you can essentially look for jobs, you can look for companies, and I personally like it to use for finding contacts, because if you have a person's name, you can put it into Career Shift and find their email address. But these things are really meant to be used in conjunction with each other. So for instance, as a best practice, you might start with LinkedIn, and you can go to University of Pennsylvania's alumni page, and this is called the Find Alumni tool. Because if you click on that little alumni tab there, it's going to bring you to an aggregate of 200,000 Penn alumni on LinkedIn. And then on that same page, you'll have all these chances to filter by what they do, where they work, where they're located, what their major was, a bunch of different things. And you can really pare it down to find people that are doing really interesting things in terms of what you're looking for in your career. And then there's ways that you can potentially reach out to them. If you have some connections with common connections, then maybe you can ask that person to put you in touch. It could also be that you're in the same group as them. Sometimes people don't realize that if you're in the same group as somebody on LinkedIn, you can actually send them a private direct message through that group. So join lots of groups because it gives you access to a lot more people. We have the University of Pennsylvania alumni group, which you can definitely join as a current student if you're not already a part of it. There are about 45,000 members, so a quarter of all Penn people who are on LinkedIn are in this group, and that's 1 in 4 people you have access to where you could private direct message them through the group. So definitely check that out. And I know Dustin is going to talk more about the profile side of LinkedIn a little bit later. MyPenn, as I mentioned, is our alumni database. Let's say you find somebody on LinkedIn that would be ideal to talk to. They have a really cool career. You want to get a sense more of what the day in the life is like for them, but you can't get in touch with them on LinkedIn unless you ask to connect. That might be a good reason to transition over to MyPenn, because you can put their name in and then potentially get their email address there. What you'll often find on MyPenn, even though people can update it with where they work, and it can be a great search engine as well, it's not going to be as up-to-date as LinkedIn. So a lot of times you might put the person's name in and you can get their email address real easy, but it says nothing about where they currently work. So if you were to run a search in MyPenn, then for a specific industry or a specific company, it might not bring the same results as LinkedIn. And then third, I mentioned Career Shift. This database, like I said, you can use for jobs, companies. This slide is highlighting contacts. You can put a person's name in, put in their company. It's very likely you'll find their work address this way. So all 3 of those databases combined, you can really get a great broad network very quickly. And then you can be cold emailing those alumni to try to see if people would be willing to chat for 20 minutes, talk about a day in their life, what they've done to get from Penn point A to point B, where they are now. It's really effective. We find that it is really going to be one of the tools that helps you stand out. And if you're cold applying and you're not networking, you're far less likely to move forward with that process. So we highly, highly recommend taking advantage of this Penn network. That is probably one of Penn's greatest resources. And then lastly, I just want to chat about following up effectively. This can mean a bunch of things, whether it's a career fair or it's a coffee chat or it's a Zoom 20-minute conversation. You want to send a thank you email within 24 hours of having that conversation. So whether it's to a recruiter, thanking them for coming to campus, or if it's to an alum, thanking them for taking the time to talk about their job, just mention maybe what you've learned. mention, if they gave some recommendations for next steps for you, talk about how you're going to follow up on that. And then that gives room for later. You can update them. Say, hey, I took your advice and look at all these great things that happened. I thank you so much for helping me with this. And it gives you a way to have future touch points. Same thing if you happen to come across an article, maybe you're reading, that reminds you of your conversation that you had with an alum. You could perhaps send them that article and say, hey, this reminded me of what we talked about. I hope you're well. Also, here's what's kind of going on with my updates and what's going on in my search. And it gives you a good way of just sort of reaching out. Also, it could be the holiday season. Maybe just send them a quick happy holidays. So there's lots of ways you can have an organic approach to keeping your network close so that should you be able to utilize their help in the future, they're at your fingertips. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Ann. I'm going to bring everybody back up on stage here. Take your PowerPoint down. And we got a great question from the YouTube chat. And this is from Brendan Kennedy. And this young man asks, if you reach out for an informational interview, do you think it's still a good idea to attach a resume, even if it's just a meet and greet?
I'd love to hear what my colleagues had to say about this. I tend to say keep it real casual at first. I usually say don't start with the resume because it's really going to suggest that you're looking for help, either getting an internship or getting a job. If you have a resume ready to go, I don't think there's anything wrong with mentioning in one of your correspondences like, hey, I'd love to share my resume if you're interested in seeing it, or please let me know if you'd like to see my resume. But for the most part, I like keeping it more casual and then waiting a little bit until an appropriate time to share.
Do you think it's a good idea to have one on hand in case you're asked for it? So if you meet for coffee and at the end I say, that's great. Do you have a copy of your resume I could take back to my office?
Absolutely, because you don't want to be caught unprepared. So definitely having something with you should you be asked. That could be, it could be if it's just even a casual conversation, you always want to have a resume ready to go. But happy to hear from anybody else and if anybody else has differing or similar opinions.
I like the casual component. I think that's the key part of this whole piece, where I think a lot of times you want to create a good, long-lasting relationship or connection with these people. I think it'll usually help you have a good conversation with them. So like you said, I think sometimes that adds an extra layer of professionalism or an expectation to the email. But I mean, I think if you're active, and this might lead into some things we're talking about later, if you're active at keeping your LinkedIn profile up to date, really easy way could be in your email signature at the bottom. Just have your LinkedIn posted there, and then if they really wanted to learn more about you, it's only going to take them a click if they needed to, and it's going to be pretty low there, that they won't feel like the expectation like you're asking them that they need to be looking over this or need to be using it in any sort of way.
I would also say that the idea of networking, hopefully, right, is just to build relationships at this point, right? There's always sort of this underlying base to it, right, where we're looking for an elevation of our application, or we're looking for more information about a company, right? But in the short term, right, if you can keep it to I'm interested in you and where you work, right, I think that person is going to feel a lot more, they're going to be a lot more willing, right, to help you when it comes time for that ask, right, if you don't go in too hard at the beginning.
Yeah, not keeping it as least transactional as possible, I think, is going to lead to much smoother conversations, and people are going to be much more likely to want to help because they won't feel that pressure that you're just trying to get something out of them. It should just purely be relationship building and information gathering.
I have an eye on the time, but I do want to ask one more question on this topic. Can I email lots of people at the same company at once to optimize my chances of hearing back? I think this is something we've all heard from students.
Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I do get this question a lot, as do I think a lot of us, as Michael pointed out. I think that you have to tread carefully here a little bit. You don't want to be the person that's coming across too strong necessarily and trying to reach out to too many people, because then it could either be seen as, wow, this person's really excited to work for us, which would obviously be the upside to the potential. But then there's also ooh, this person is really pushing everything in. Do they have an idea, or are they just trying to, have contact with somebody at the company? I always say maybe put out a feeler or two first, see if there's any type of response before then maybe moving on to the next person, as opposed to just kind of going through the entire staff directory if you're able to find one and sending the same email. People do talk. So if they're at the same office, it's like, oh, you got that email from Dustin? Well, so did I. So did I. What did he say? That's just my opinion. I'd love to hear other people too, though.
I 100% agree.
I think it's a nuisance. But I heard a story. I think I've told this on the podcast before. I heard a story that Howie Roseman, the general manager of the Eagles, got his job by doing exactly this, just blast emailing as many other people in the football industry as possible. And at one point, they were talking to each other. They were like, "Hey, I think I'm going to talk to this Howie Roseman guy. I keep getting emailed by him." And the guy he was talking to was like, "Yeah, me too. Isn't that weird?" And they all of a sudden bonded. Like, well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe this guy is worth speaking to. So I think there's an inherent risk that you're going to turn a lot of people off. I mean, maybe you do get noticed for some right reasons. I don't know that it's something that I would recommend in any sort of real way.
So in that case, Natty, he was actually casting a very wide net across different teams, right? So within the NFL, but
that's true too.
He wasn't, I don't think he was emailing everyone at the Jaguars and everyone at the Eagles and everyone, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a great story. And just personally, I've had two recent experiences with sort of informational interviews that have led to hiring. One here at Penn, and actually, so you referred someone to me who was just sort of interested in media production and the podcast, and she's going to take over as the podcast producer next year after a casual interview that we had this summer. And my own alumni office from Muhlenberg connected me with someone who was getting ready to graduate, and she had an informational interview with me and then came and did an externship, and now she's our pre-med coordinator. So things really can happen from these. It's not a guarantee, but it's such a great way to get your foot in the door, to learn more about a specific employer, learn more about someone who's been on a similar journey from you. So it's so important. And again, a great segue, because a great way to start your networking journey is on LinkedIn. And now Dustin is going to tell us all about that.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I think it's perfect that Ann had gone just right before me, because to do any of these things that Ann just eloquently laid out for us, we have to make sure that our profile is in what I would call, networking ready state. So I'm going to just highlight a couple of things here quickly that you can get started with on the profile. And for anybody who's new to LinkedIn, or is maybe thinking about starting one, or just created a profile, LinkedIn will also do a really nice job of kind of giving you some tips and tricks of how to buff out your profile. I've buffed mine out pretty well at this point, so I don't have a whole lot of LinkedIn steps left that it suggests, but it'll say, oh, like add a tagline or add a profile picture, just to kind of continue to boost the profile a little bit. So I am going to touch on a couple of things. So I'm going to start with the headshot, which is really important. So for our UPenn folks here in the chat as well, if you're not familiar, we have now for about a year, a little over a year, we have a photo booth in our office that you're able to come use anytime that the office is open, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You don't need an appointment for it. The only time that you wouldn't be able to use it is a specific group had reserved it. But headshots can be really important, and your profile is going to have a much higher chance of being noticed and recognized. And facial recognition is all part of the relationship building that Ann was talking about early on. So please, reach out if you're interested, or, just show up. It's a self-service booth that we use, but it's a really good way. And I find that it oftentimes can be a barrier for students to getting a LinkedIn profile started. So we're trying to alleviate that a little bit. So please come in, use our headshot booth, and get yourself a profile picture there up on LinkedIn. The second thing I wanted to point out here is this microphone next to my name. And so this is something that you can only do through the mobile app, actually. It's not a feature that you can currently add on through the web, but on your phone, if you download the LinkedIn app, you're going to be able to record a pronunciation of your name. So if you find yourself and your name's commonly mispronounced, my name might not be the best example of that, but I still added it anyway, just for inclusivity, and just in case anyone wanted to make sure that they pronounce my name correctly. So that's a really nice feature that you can add that not everybody knows about. And right next to that microphone, you're going to see this Dustin has verifications when I hover over this check mark. So this is a good way that you can actually verify yourself on LinkedIn. So if you're reaching out to people and they don't know you, like Ann was discussing, this is a really great way to show somebody like, hey, I am who I say I am. And it's really easy to do. I think I had to upload maybe like a picture of my driver's license or something like that. So it's really not all that difficult. So I definitely would recommend doing those two things. The next thing I wanted to point out was this headline, this tagline. People use this for a variety of different things. So you have an opportunity to either maybe use adjectives to describe yourself or the work that you do. Some people use this space for seeking internship in software engineering, right? Another way people use their current position title as well. Again, for my Penn folks in the chat, I wouldn't necessarily say just put student at UPenn. I would probably get a little bit more specific than that. So maybe it's software engineering student at UPenn, and then maybe you list the name of a lab that you're working in. Or, some people who have completed internships or have worked at previous companies will put like, former Google or former Amazon. Again, recruiters can search by this kind of stuff, and it's an effective way to show people what you're looking for as well. The next thing I want to point out here is this public profile and URL. So if you look at your own LinkedIn profile URL, there's a chance that you might have a whole bunch of random numbers and letters kind of jumbled up at the end. So if you click on this pencil here, you're going to be able to then go into a next page where you will be then able to edit that profile and that URL back. So Dustin Miller, again, a pretty common name. So I wasn't able to just have my name as my URL, but I added, MED just to the end, and that had not been taken yet. So you can, put the number 1 or your favorite number, or maybe try a dash, or just try your name, a middle initial, anything that can make it look a little bit cleaner, not only on LinkedIn, but then when you put it on your resume as well. The next section, and again, when this says private to you on LinkedIn, again, for anybody who's new, these sections won't be seen by people as they're visiting your profile page. So don't worry about that too much. Again, these are just some different ways they can kind of help you enhance your profile. But the about section will be the very first thing that is going to be seen when employers or anybody, peers of yours, are coming to your LinkedIn profile page. So that'll head up right underneath this open to is where the about section will go. A lot of times it's just important to fill this out. Again, you can use this space however you want. I would say in an effective way, it can be describing a little bit of minimal background about yourself. I talk again, minimally about my experience in higher ed, and then just kind of like my passion or my mission, and then some educational background. But again, you could use this for positions you're seeking, experiences that you've had, people you're looking to connect with. It just, again, I love how Ann said it brings you to the human element of things. So I would just, if you can do this, it makes you go from candidate to human in another way as well. Because the first thing you do when you connect with people, like Ann showed us how to do, is you're actually then going to be, your profile is going to be looked at. That's going to be one of the first things that people are going to elect to do as well. So I definitely would recommend filling out this about section, especially as it's super high up early on. The next thing I wanted to point out was the activity section here. So this is a really good indicator for people to see if someone is engaged on LinkedIn, or if they're active, if the profile seems like it could be a way, that you could reach somebody or network and connect with them. Now, this does not mean that you have to post your own content all the time, right? You can see here my 3 most recent posts. I reposted somebody I'm connected with. They're hiring, so they have just a support staff job fair. I typically share anything I see, just because the more shares, LinkedIn works on an algorithm that just the more shares and clicks, the more viral something can go. So I'm always willing to share things and opportunities. You can see down below, I just recently shared a position is open in Penn Engineering Online for an academic advisor. So I have a lot of higher ed folks in my circle. So again, wanted to just share that over as well. And it's just, again, a good way to see if somebody's actually using the profile. You don't have to make your own contact. Just interact. Say congrats to somebody who got that promotion. Congrats to somebody who got into grad school, something like that. Then you'll have your experience section, which again, I won't spend too much. I'm not gonna spend any time on that today, but you want to fill that out as well. You can use your resume as a starting point to kind of fill out some of those things. The last section I did want to point out before questions is just the skills section here. So skills, you can list as many as you want. However, right now, LinkedIn is highlighting 2 of those skills on what I call the face of your profile. So this is the face of my profile without having to click into all of these other ones that I have listed here. You can actually edit which 2 skills you want to highlight again on the face. So for me, I have higher education and career counseling. But let's just say, for example, I was on the job search and I was going to be doing something that, required more event planning or leadership specifically. I could just go up to reorder here. And from here, I can then actually drag, event planning to the top, leadership to the top. And then you'll see when I go back to what I call, again, the front facing, you're going to see that those 2 skills have now come to the front of my LinkedIn profile as well. So you want to be strategic. Recruiters can search for things like that too. There's a lot to it. I really recommend, we can look at LinkedIn profiles here in our office too with you. So I'll stop there for now and certainly ask any questions that we might have about this. Very surface level, but looking forward to seeing if there's any questions about, the LinkedIn profile.
Thanks so much, Dustin. We do have quite a few questions. Here's one that comes up not only with students. Sometimes I even get this from some of our colleagues. Is LinkedIn Premium worth it?
Oh man, I'm going to jump in here first because I'm pretty passionate about this question in general. I think that there are some features that are nice to have. I think it depends where you're at in the process a little bit. There are ways that I didn't get into today about you can still kind of directly message somebody by adding a personalized note. LinkedIn has limited the number of those that you are able to send per month. I know Premium, you can kind of do some unlimited messaging. So I do know that it's quite expensive. So it's certainly something that everybody has to assess. I would say that I feel like I've gotten a lot out of LinkedIn. I'm a very active user of it. It's part of my everyday workflow. And I'm not a Premium user myself.
And if you're part of our Penn community, Anne already highlighted some good tools from the networking page on our website, like Career Shift. So even if you get maxed out on those messages sending direct to LinkedIn, you could just shift over to email and find someone's contact information in Career Shift or using the Penn alumni database instead. So I think there are ways that you don't need to feel like you need to make that investment of money. Like we already have you covered on other resources that'll hopefully meet the same goals.
Here's one that Natty and I were just talking about over lunch yesterday. What is a red flag when coming across a LinkedIn profile? I mean, there are whole subreddits devoted to this.
I might say if the profile is like really empty, if it's just like a list of experiences that someone's had or engaged in, but there's no bullet points, there's no context to anything. It just shows minimal effort, right? Like, why would you even advise someone look at the profile, right? To get to know you, because there's nothing on there that's important, right? Or can provide me any more details about who you are or what you want, right? So like, I would say make sure that your profile is at least comprehensive and filled out, right? Before you make it available for people to see.
Yeah, I agree. And Michael and I actually, we manage the alumni group and often have to assess, if a Penn alum, if the profile is even a real profile, because there are fake profiles out there. And I think one of the red flags that you could be a very real person, but if you have a weird picture, if it's not like a professional picture, not that it has to be professionally taken, but like a good headshot, it could raise some eyebrows there. So I think if you're a Penn in the Penn community, you can come in and use our photo booth to get a picture taken, or iPhones take great pictures now, but just make sure your profile picture looks like you and it is a professional look.
I think consistency is huge too. I just want to add, like, if you feel like it's really hard to get your consistent self across, especially across, like, maybe you had resume that you sent somewhere and then you describe an experience in completely different terms so it feels inauthentic. I think that can be a problem too. Now, we always talk about tailor your resume or tailor things to make it sound more applicable to what you're applying to. But I think there's a line there that you might cross where it sounds like you're not
make
really
sure
being
you
honest.
can back it up, right? Yeah. All right. Well, Dustin, thanks so much. We've got a few minutes left and one more topic to cover, and it's a super important one because they're going to be starting any day now. It's career fair time. So, Laura?
Okay, awesome. So I just want to talk a little bit about preparing for career fairs, some best practices, and some tips. So we have a lot of upcoming career fairs starting in September, going all the way into November, and then starting up again in February. So just, you can see all of these different career fairs through your Handshake profile. So just some step-by-step instructions for you, right? Make sure you've logged into your Handshake account. For any incoming freshmen, welcome to Penn. Make sure that you get that Handshake account ready. Go to your events tab and you can filter by career fairs, right? This is just a great, what's happening on Penn's campus too, right? So make sure you bookmark, register for these events, and add them to your calendars so you can continue to stay in the know of what's going on. This is a question I get all the time, like what employers are coming, right? So you can actually see all the employers that have committed to coming to a career fair, right? So this is a snapshot of some employers that are coming to CareerLink, I believe, which is on the 6th of September. So you can see, right, are there employers that are coming that match my career interests, my desires, right, as we move forward? How can I prepare or tailor my pitches, right, depending on the employers that I want to talk to? Maybe you're strategic, right, about the types of resumes, right, if you're going to tailor your documents you would bring to a career fair, right? Or just be strategic about who you're going to stand in line to talk to, right? If you have a plan saying, I'm going to go in and talk to these 4 employers that are going to CareerLink, right, you already sort of have a vision for the hour that you're spending there. Another big piece of advice I have is prepare, right? So research and preparation makes you a compelling applicant, right? It makes you a compelling student to talk to at career fairs, right? So these are all things that you should know about. The company culture at the organization you're interested in, different types of positions. Many of our career fairs, when employers register, they also indicate, right, the types of positions or jobs that they're hiring for at that time. So make sure that you look for that because there might be something that's just a great fit for you that you need to learn more about, right? So when you are talking to the employer, you can really and strategically mention, right, that role that you're interested in and why you may be interested in it. What they do, right? So the industry in general and the services that that company provides, and maybe some competitors, right? This isn't necessarily something that you would talk about with the employer, right? But just to have an understanding of, okay, this is a healthcare consulting firm. What other healthcare consulting firms may also be at this career fair? And then the question I get is how? Where is all this information hiding? And these are just some of the resources that we have readily available through our website, Penn Career Services, as well as outside of our specific services or within the Penn community. So Handshake, of course, right? You can go to an employer page. You can learn a little bit more about them. Of course, obviously their websites, LinkedIn, as Dustin has mentioned. The Vault guides are really helpful. And this is something that you can access just by going to our website. Lippincott Library. For those of you that are new to the Penn community, there's a ton of free resources for you there where you can learn about full industries, organizations, companies, and last but not least, Glassdoor. So we have 2 types of career fairs on our campus, so virtual and in-person, right? This list here really describes what a virtual career fair would be able to do for you or how you can plan for that, right? So check out our virtual fair. This is one that Natty and I are actually in charge of managing this year. So we hope to have many students sign up for that. A virtual fair, you can expect no lines or major constraints, right? That's something that you would see in an in-person fair, especially for a popular employer, right? You might have to wait 30 minutes in order to talk to them. You know what's coming, right? So you have time to prepare, right, for that discussion. And you have a set 10 to 15 minutes, right, to talk to that individual from a certain company that you have signed up, right, to have that conversation with. And then sometimes there are group sessions. They're typically 30 minutes in length with some unlimited capacity, but they allow you to ask questions and get answers right in that moment, right? So virtual career fairs are a great option for people that may not have time to stop by in person. They also bring employers from different areas, from the US, right? That might have been more difficult to come in person to those fairs. What do employers want to know, right? How should you prepare personally, right? You should be able to answer these questions, right? How can you contribute to the organization? So what are your relevant or transferable experiences or educational experiences that you want to be able to talk about with them, right? Why do you want to work for them, right? So what about the industry or organization interests you? How does it relate to your goals, right? If you have 30 to 60 seconds to give a pitch to an employer, right, this might be the thing that you want to touch the most on, right? Why are you the best candidate, right? But how does your personal mission, values, and goals align with that of the company, right? And last but not least, what are you going to be like as a coworker, right? My kind of general rule is can they picture maybe eating lunch with you, right? Are you personable? Are you in line with that company culture that you did some research on? And of course, staying in touch, right? So this is the last thing I want to dive into today, right? It's really important to follow up. So whether you attend a virtual fair where you get that solid 10 minutes with someone, or you're going to an in-person fair where you may only have 1 to 3 minutes really to talk to an employer, right? You really want to make sure you're following up with them, right? So recap what you've learned or the conversation that you had. Maybe you have a favorite part of your discussion that stands out that you want to talk about. Again, this plays into what Anne was saying about networking, right? So make sure that you have personalized, right, your outreach and your approach. Reiterate your interest and intention. You can even ask about ways to stay in touch through a process, right? If you're involved in an application process, or you can say, would it be okay if I reach back out to you in a month or two to update you on my progress, right? So there's ways that you can even ask that and confirm with the other person that that's okay to do. And consider when possible, sending a brief thank you note. I include this in there because I think sometimes it's nice to be able to send that handwritten note if you have that availability. It really does set you apart from other people that may not take the time to do that, and it's a personal touch. So I'm happy to take any questions now about the career fairs that are happening on Penn's campus.
Thanks so much, Laura. We do have time for a couple of questions. One that I know everybody gets asked, what's the dress code?
Sure. So I would like to say, right, please come in business casual attire to many of our in-person career fairs. And if you're communicating with an employer virtually as well, right, you do want to make sure that you're in business casual attire, right, dressed to impress. I don't necessarily adhere to women must be wearing a certain thing, men must be wearing a certain thing. If you identify outside of that, right, what you should be wearing, right, just try not to wear anything that's distracting, right? So you really want you to be the focus, not necessarily what you're wearing. Love for anyone else to jump in.
Some of it's dependent on the employers that you plan to talk to. I think if you're planning to talk to people in a more hyper corporate, maybe a finance kind of realm, you might want to up it a little bit. But if you're talking to a tech company, they're probably going to be there in t-shirts too. So you may be able to down it a little bit as well. The other reality is we know that students are busy in between classes. So we tell employers not to expect a high level of dress necessarily, and that we recommend to students that it's business casual, just like Laura said. But we would rather you be able to get to the fair, experience the fair, than feel like you really need to go back to your dorm, take a whole hour to get ready, and then come back, and then maybe not be able to experience as much as you would have liked.
All right, I think this is going to be our last question. And it's, if I don't like any of the employers that are attending the fair, should I still even go? What's the point, man?
I would love to hear if any of my colleagues want to jump in first. I definitely have a strong opinion on this too.
Sure. I think you 100% should still go. It's great practice. All the things we talked about today about positioning yourself, networking, elevator pitches that Natty talked about in the ChatGPT and network. I mean, all of it is together. If you don't like any of the employers that are attending the fair, it's great practice. Shake off some of the nerves before you get an opportunity to speak. And it's just in general, it can prepare you maybe for the next career fair. It's not just the fall, everybody. We also have career fairs in the spring semester as well. So why not, knock some rust off, or if it's your first time, just go look at it. You don't even have to, if you're that nervous, you don't want to talk to anybody, you don't have to. You could just walk around and just see what it's like. I get that question a lot, and it's hard to describe unless you've experienced it. So I would encourage you to at least go to one.
Yeah, and if you don't necessarily feel the pressure to impress an employer that you're not really interested in working for, then it's probably going to be like a really good intro, like Dustin said, into a career fair. Also, you don't know what you don't know. For all you know, you have some conversations with some recruiters, and they tell you about some awesome parts about their company, and you're like, oh, maybe I should have a little bit of a more open mind. So don't be too narrow in what you think you want to do with your career. There's lots of exploration to be had for that.
And you get some cool swag.
True. I was going to say that exactly, right? Like, how do you know that you don't like any of the employers, right? They may not be top of mind, right? Or like ranked on your top 10 interests. But right, you build connections with people that might change your perspective. So as Dustin said too, we absolutely recommend that you still go. Even if you're not ready to yet start talking with employers or network, right? This is a great opportunity for you to get your feet wet, and a good way to get the ball rolling through your next 4 years here at Penn.
And it's a big part of career exploration. Just like you said, you may have a knee-jerk reaction to employer at some big conglomerate, like, oh, well, they're a tech company, and I want to be a writer. And then you go and you talk to someone, and they say, oh, we hire writers. We need people to write for our website. We have a blog. We have communications people. So you never know what you might find just by going and talking. And if it's your first career fair, if you're a first or second year student or a first year graduate student, you've never done a career fair before, then even if you're not quite ready to be on the job market, it's great to go and know what it's like and what the flow is like, so that you will be a little less nervous when you're ready to go for real, because you'll have seen what it's like and you kind of get a sense of how it all operates, and it's one less thing that you have to think about. So I want to thank all of you. It was a great opportunity to kick off the new semester, get ready for classes start, get ready for a whole month of career fairs and recruiting to start. And just remember that Career Services is here. We're ready to take appointments with you, answer your quick questions. You can get in touch with us. Oh, I put Natty's phone number up there by mistake. I forgot. That was supposed to be our social media. I forgot. I changed it to Natty's phone number. But
Give me a call. I don't even know it's the right number, to be fair.
Call Natty with all your questions. You can find us careerservices.upenn.edu. All our social media links are there. Natty and I host the CS Radio podcast every Monday. That's going to be starting up again in September. So we hope that you'll subscribe and listen. We have new interesting topics like this every week. So thank you all so much for being a part of this. Have a great school year, and we'll see you all real soon.
Bye.